I wanted the tactical side of things. I wanted homesteading. I wanted primitive skills. I wanted prepping. It's all hand in hand. People put these labels on things. Prepping, tinfoil hat. And it's nothing of that. Our forefathers were preppers. They were tactical people. They sowed the land. They protected their homestead. They raised livestock. I mean, they preserved, and we just stuck these terms on things now.
Hello and welcome to the Off-Grid Podcast. I'm your host, Patrick, and today my guest is a rising force in the self-reliance community, Robert Toomes, also known as Bob Toomes, also known as T. T, thank you for joining me.
Appreciate you having me on here, Patrick. Great to be here. And yes, many aliases. T is for all the lazy friends I've had in the past. It's like signing an X, kind of the same deal. They didn't want to say Toomes. They just said T. So we ran
right
with it. It's easy to remember, right?
I think Toomes is a cool name. I want to call you Toomes. Like that's, like
I'll take it.
Tombstone.
I'll take it.
I mean, it's cool.
I've heard
I
them
like
all.
it. Nice,
Yep.
Nice. Perfect. Well, let's start off by just having you tell us your origin story, how you got to where you are today, and your journey, this journey into self-reliance and survival that brought you to Mountain Readiness.
Oh, for sure, man. So pure stupidity. That's how I pretty much got here at this point. Now my father went off grid before I was born. He was 42 when I was born, and he had kind of lived a good chunk of his life at that point, and he was tired. He was tired of the world. He was one of them guys like, I've had enough of the big city life. I'm done. And so when I was born, I'm the oldest of three, and he had just moved us to the middle of nowhere. I grew up, no electricity, no running water, a large amount in the Ozarks, the Boot Hill backwoods there. So actual straight hillbilly, born and raised. And so our life was not the average norm. We lived in tents. I remember living in a tent for a year, back of a Ford Ranger. I mean, it's washing clothes in creeks, heating up water, cooking on campfires, cooking on wood burning stoves. So it was normal to us. I will say that it was normal to us. Walmart, going to Wally World was like an amusement park, once a month when we go to town. That was what we did. But growing up like that is tough. Down to just packing water and firewood. I think people in this day and age, they go out on the weekends, and good on them to get out in the wilderness and do stuff. But when you live it day in and day out, it is it's monotonous, and it gets very difficult. I mean, for a family of five, how much water do you have to pack in? That was 25, 30 gallons of water a day we got to pack in. If we weren't next to live water, which happened quite often. Fires, we didn't start a fire every day because we were cooking 3 times a day. So it was, that fire had to roll 24/7. We kept that thing rolling in the middle of summer and the dead of winter. And so 15 years of that, I decided I wanted to, the big city looked way better than the backwoods. And so I left home at 15 and started gallivanting around the United States. I ended up in Fort Wayne, Indiana when I was 17. And that was like the 79th time I'd moved, and 36 states that I'd lived in by 17 years old. And I took a job with the Amish, driving for the Amish there. And I resided in Indiana there in Fort Wayne for about 20 years. Kids came along, grew up, and I realized my first 15 years of living in the middle of nowhere seemed tough, but the big city life ended up not being as glamorous as what I had thought it would be. And of course, Fort Wayne, second largest city in Indiana, right between Detroit and Chicago. Um, and I was tired of it. You know, my wife Amber and I told her I was tired of fighting with the city about my garden in town was a pest attractant, and you know I couldn't have firewood in town. And I said, you know, there's got to be something better than this. We got to get out of here. You know, I messed up. I belong in the woods. The city life ain't for me. So we moved here to Wilkes County, North Carolina, 9 years ago, going on 10 years ago now, and started our homesteading journey. You know, it's been rough, just the two of us. We've got 40 acres out here up on the hill, not too far from the parkway here, and starting from the scratch, had a little house on it, completely needed to be rebuilt. You know, getting back into the lifestyle of self-sufficiency and homesteading, you know, getting back into the groove of raising chickens and goats and gardens. And you'd be surprised how much you forget about when you don't do it on the daily. So we just started relearning everything, or at least I did, relearning everything that I grew up with. And we kind of we started going around to different preparedness get-togethers, and there's quite a few of them. A lot of them that are great. There's a lot of great festivals to go to, but it always seemed like they were lacking. There was never a cross pollination of all those aspects of survival and preparedness. You know, there's a lot of big homesteading events, and they're great. Homesteading is awesome, but everyone is scared to cross that line into homestead defense, and you know, those areas that get you flagged on a lot of platforms, and which you know, you guys know what I'm talking about.
We
So
do.
you know, I told my wife, we were at an event, and I was like, you know, bushcraft is great, but if you're down to rubbing sticks together, man, you're in a bad spot. You're in a bad spot of your life. It's something that you should know, but there's other parts of this that should be being taught. And so I decided I wanted to start an event that covered all areas of preparedness, and that was Mountain Readiness. You know, I wanted the tactical side of things. I wanted homesteading. I wanted primitive skills. I wanted prepping. You know, it's all hand in hand. People put these labels on things. You know, ooh, you know, prepping, tinfoil hat. And it's nothing of that. Our forefathers were preppers. They were tactical people. They sowed the land. They protected their homestead. They raised livestock. I mean, you know, they preserved, and we just stuck these terms on things now, and so that was where I went with it. I wanted a preparedness event that anyone and everyone of every walk of life could come to and benefit from each other. And thus far, this was the third one, and you know, it's great to see Carl Erickson, you know, a living legend from Tactical Rifleman, over there learning how to make, you know, infused honey, you know, herbal infused honey. I mean, it's great. And that's what it's about, you know, this community building. And so here we are now 3 years later.
That's a heck of a journey, and definitely a lot to unpack there. Um, so okay, let's go way back to where you started. You know, you were literally living absence of a grid
Yes.
until you were 15. How how did that work? Like, was it like, where did you decide, or do you remember how your family decided, like, where you guys were going to hunker down for a little while? And like, you mentioned going to Walmart, but like, how much were you living off the land versus, you know,
Right.
tapping into, you know, some economic resource?
Um, so completely off the grid, we were usually 25 to 50 miles from town, anywhere between there. We've lived, you know, we never made it to Alaska. When my father brought up moving to Alaska, my mother told him, not a chance. There's no way. We are not flying a plane into, you know, our campsite. I was kind of for that myself, you know, but just because I always wanted to see Alaska. But you know, we went into town, but to be quite honest, we grew up pretty on the poor side of things. So the money there wasn't a whole lot of it. So it was garden. My job was firewood and hauling water and helping with the garden. There was no such thing as telling my father that you were bored, right? If you were bored, it meant you get to split some more firewood. And that's a full-time job for one person, firewood and water. That was my life for many, many years that I can remember, but we did a lot of stuff to make money. We logged, we mined iron ore. Like I remember pickaxing iron ore out of the side of the hills in Missouri. A lot of iron ore deposits. So for an entire day's work and a pickup truckload full of ore, that'd get you like $10. Just in case you were wanting to strike it rich. Stripping witch hazel. Pulling witch hazel. The medical industry at that time used to buy witch hazel and the berries. So you fight off the copperheads because they love witch hazel bushes, and we'd fill up the big 55-gallon trash bags, haul those into town. It was just like a little of this and a little of that. We hunted, we fished, and don't get me wrong, like we were not survivalists. We were just really good at starving, right? That would be the best way to put my upbringing. My father is a genius. He really is when it comes to books. He's done it all. He's got, he was a mathematician. He's got a degree in paralegal law, served in the military, ham radio first class operator's license. But when it comes to the simple stuff, not so much, not so much. It was pretty rough to say the least. So, yeah, it was kind of one of those things. Survivors barely surviving is what the Toomes family was at that time.
Was this on your, did you have a home, like, were you on a homestead growing up? Was this your own property? Like what, you said 50 miles out of town. What was the scenario there?
My father did not like people. So there was a saying he would tell my mother. He would tell my mother, I distinctly remember multiple times my father looking at my mother and he would say, "I see smoke, Ma." And that meant someone was living too close to us. So we picked up and moved. And we have lived everywhere from Denver, Colorado to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho to Butte, Montana to Alexandria, Louisiana, and everything in between. So, he would just, we would be living in the middle of nowhere, and it was always something primitive. I mean, we lived in a tent in Ellington, Missouri for about a year. That was entertaining. Family of 5 in a 4-person tent. And if you think living in a trailer is bad with tornadoes, try a tent. We had a tornado come by us with that instance. It was I didn't know canvas could flap like that. So
was it during the day or at night?
It was in the evening. It was late evening. So it was just, it was getting the dusk. It was starting to dim everything down. And so being inside that tent with that canvas whipping and flapping like that, I'll never forget it. It was like the videos you see the people up there on Mount Everest. They're up there on Mount Everest and just the wind is just nonstop cutting. Hail. We lived in a horse shed in outside of it was right between Mountain Home and Harrison, Arkansas, in Bruno, Payette. Bruno is one town, Payette is the other town. They're divided by the highway and a bridge there. And we lived about a mile up a nasty road that it was just, clay cut out of the side of the hill. And so half the time we'd have to leave our vehicle down at the bottom of the hill, walk all the way up. But I remember we moved into this shed in the middle of the field. Great view, mountainous, about 180 plus degree view of all the surrounding towns, mountains. And I remember this horse shed was about to fall over. So we braced it up with some trees, just some posts to keep it for, that's a horrible way to wake up. Nobody wants to wake up to a shed falling on top of you. So we braced it up, and I remember at the middle of the night, man, it scared me to death. All of us, about 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. I remember the whole thing shook. and there was this high pitched shrill outside. It was just, and would jump up. My father grabbed the lever action, and it was an elk.
Mm.
And an elk had decided that we shouldn't be living there. So for a month straight, this elk would come back every single night and ram the side of this shed with us in there because it wanted us to leave. And finally, it gave up after it trashed the Ford Ranger. It decided to blast the side of the truck about 4 or 5 times, and it left. We never saw it again. That was the end of it. But it was all that weird stuff like that growing up that made it special and for our lives. But yeah, that's
Not too many
gypsies.
people can say that they had an elk as a landlord trying to evict them.
Yes, yes, yeah. That poor Ford Ranger. It still run after that, but man, it looked like hell.
It was a full size, like, what do you think the spread on its
I was too scared to even look out there, but that thing, there wasn't any good fender or door left on that truck. I mean, he was a beast, and they had just started introducing elk back to that area. And so, of course, they're endangered on top of it. Not that we would have shot it anyway, but they were also on the endangered list to that area of Arkansas. So, it was just put up with the elk being pissed off and, ramming the side of the truck and the shed. So, and I also, that's where I started working construction. We were homeschooled. And so I decided I was done with school at 15 and got a job with the old boy at the foot of the hill who was a mason. And that's where I started cutting my teeth in the construction business. And every morning I would grab the 30 We had a Savage 30-30 lever action or deer rifle, and make my way all the way down the hill at about 4:30 in the morning. It's still dark, and that part of Arkansas, I mean, it has big cat, it has obviously elk, all that stuff. And so walk all the way down at the bottom of the hill, catch a ride, and work all day as a laborer for the Masons, and then come back. And so yeah, it got a little creepy. It was a little creepy some mornings, I can tell you that much.
I did some training in the military at Fort Chaffee in Arkansas. And the thing that bothers me the most about Arkansas is the ticks.
Oh yeah.
Was that an issue when you were there? Just
Missouri as
I've
well.
never seen a
Missouri and
place with
Arkansas.
a more terrible tick population.
Missouri.
Yeah, Missouri's worse.
Did you ever make it out there towards like Fort Leonard Wood or anything like that
No,
in
I
Missouri?
haven't.
Man, Missouri is ticks and chiggers. Like, I
Mm.
don't know if you've ever caught a case of chiggers, boy, but that makes ticks look like a field day.
We always defended against that. Not a lot of people, I think, understand what chiggers are. Could you talk about those a little bit? Because
um,
they'll
you need to
sneak up
have
on
your
you.
you need to have your fingernails clipped, because if you don't, you're gonna claw your skin clean off. I mean, and they always go for those nice, soft, uh, supple areas of the body to put it mildly. Chiggers, yeah, little bitty orange bugs that bury into your skin, and you don't realize they're there until you're clawing yourself stupid. Um, that was one of those, slap a bunch of Vaseline on top of it and try to, starve them out for oxygen to get them to come out. A tick, you can get them to back out. We used to use, a match head, light it, and then put
Hmm.
it up next to them to get them to back out, cover them
Yep.
in Vaseline to starve them for oxygen. There was a few ways to get ticks out, but chiggers were a whole nother world of hell.
They're
So
so small, you
chiggers,
can't really pick them. They're
you they're in
they're
there,
almost
and
microscopic.
yeah, you can see at best a little bitty orange dot, and that's it. And yeah, they're brutal. They're brutal. The seed ticks as well. Did you ever get into any seed ticks?
So, so here's one of my most horrific experiences. During training, I was reconnaissance, so we set up an LPOP, which is short for listening post, observation post. It's basically some place that you like hunker down and you keep an eye on things. It's supposed to be like a hidden thing, right? So I was in the brush, with my sergeant at the time, and we were sitting there. We had some optics. We were overlooking this mock training village, and he looks over at me and he's like, "Hey, Dietrich." I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Look down at your sleeve." And I look, it was like the old pattern BDUs, right? And it looked like the pattern was shifting, like the pattern was moving. And I realized we must have been in a tick nest. We were under some cedars, and just it must have been like tens, hundreds of thousands of these tiny little ticks just moving, right? And I look over at him, I'm like, "Sergeant, you're covered in the same thing." And all stealth went out the window. We both stood up. We were tearing off clothes, like trying to scrape ticks off of us. It was crazy. It was like the most ticks I've ever seen in one spot in my life.
Same.
Good old Arkansas.
Those things are nasty, man. The seed ticks, they're really, really small, and maybe that's what you had on you, but they will all congregate on a plant. So there'll be 1,000 of those little seed ticks on a stalk. And as you walk by, as soon as you brush up against it, they all jump off on you at the same time. So I got into the habit a lot of times when I was walking through the woods, I would wear shorts and I would carry some kerosene with me and and a rag. And no joke, you can feel them. If you have pants on, you're done. Them dudes jump on you. By the time you realize that they're on you, they're already all in your clothes.
Oh
So
gosh, yeah.
but the shorts, and I'm talking about those mailman shorts, right? The real high, like
Just
stupid
hiking
looking
way up,
shorts.
like 70s basketball
Right.
type of shorts.
Like Night at the Roxbury / Studio 54 shorts, all the way up with a pair of boots on. And as soon as you felt that on your leg, I take that kerosene, squirt it down on a rag, and then just wipe around my leg in a circle, and then just wipe all the way down, and it kills everything instantly. Takes them all out one shot. Not a good idea if you're a smoker. Maybe not something you want to do, but it worked great if you weren't toking up a cigarette. So
stay away from
yeah,
sparks if you're using kerosene for insect
kerosene.
control.
Just a rule of thumb too. When you live out in the brush like that, lice is a thing as well. Like people say, "Oh, it's dirty people." Well, if you live in the dirt, if you camp all the time, like your whole life is just living out in the dirt, you get lice. Kerosene works great for that too, man. Rub your head down, throw a bag over it. An hour later, everything's dead. Probably a lot of good things are dead as well, but it kills all the lice.
Yeah, I'd rather just everything die than just have lice.
Kill it all.
That's kerosene. I like that. So you were like when you started your construction, at 15, and you're like, I'm out of camp. I'm gonna go strike off in the city somewhere. Is construction what brought you into more urbanized life?
Yeah, my father, and he decided it was time to move again in Arkansas, and the gentleman that I was working for wanted to keep me on. So I stayed around on my own there. And being homeschooled, we went to a lot of different like homeschooler get-togethers. I got to know kids all over the United States, And at that time, I mean, I'm 48. So, pen pals, writing letters was a thing. That was way before Facebook and Messenger and all these social media platforms. It was, pen pals. So we would write each other, and the homeschooling, the realm of homeschooling, kids are not really kids. They all have jobs, because you have that time. You take out all the bell ringing from the public school system, and you remove all the downtime, and you just focus in a few hours. You can get all your schoolwork done. But I decided that school just wasn't for me. So, I took the job. My father and mother and brother and sister, they decided, he had decided it was time to go. And I stuck around, and that's where I started moving around. A friend of mine I talked to, in, in Idaho, ended up going there and just started moving around. I mean, I was underage. I wasn't even old enough to, you know, have an apartment, but I would stay with these friends and move around. And that's where Fort Wayne came in at 17 is a good friend of mine there was working for the Amish as a driver. And of course, Amish, great carpenters, still have a lot of really good friends that are Amish. And they're not allowed to drive cars though. So, but they're allowed to pay me to drive them, and that's where I come in. So, my job was to show up at each one of them's house, pick them up, and we'd head to the job site, be there by 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning, and then work all day. And that's where I cut my teeth in the framing and all that kind of stuff was working with the Amish and got even more in touch with being more self-sufficient because the Amish are an excellent example of community. Like it
Did
is
you notice
amazing.
did you
Yes.
notice a lot of similarities between how you grew up living a homestead life and how Amish communities were living their lives as well?
Not at all. I noticed that they lived way better than we did. Those guys have it down to a fine science, man. Like,
Hmm.
you know, a lot of people. Are you familiar with Amish? Do you know any Amish or have worked with any Amish?
I used to live in the eastern Upper Peninsula of Michigan,
Oh yeah,
and there's a big Amish community up there. There even at the Walmart, there's a hitch for their
hitching
horses
posts.
because they drive their buggies into town. So I'm a little familiar with them, but I've never lived amongst them. I've only eaten their delicious food and
Yes,
the
I
stuff that
I
they
used to,
put together.
I used to go over to one of my good friends. He's a man. They have they do some of the best construction on the lakes. I mean, these guys are in high demand. They're just master craftsmen, and
Hmm.
but they love music and they love socializing. They love talking. And I still to this day, when I go to Fort Wayne, they'll invite me over. I'll bring the guitar and we'll sit around and sing songs and eat, supper. And the way the Amish work, it's crazy. Is they if you when you were born, uh, the boys and girls only go up to about 8th to 10th grade at the most, and at that point, the girls they break off and work with their mothers, and the boys break off and go to work with their fathers on a construction crew, because that's mostly what it is. They're mostly tradesmen, and I remember it was weird because we would be on a job site and there would be like 9-year-old kids running around with framing hammers and saws. And these 9, 10-year-old kids were better with a hammer and a saw than most grown men were. So you're the whole family they're all on the same crew working together. And these kids from just barely able to walk are out there working with their parents. And once you get married, you get paid you get paid an allowance, and everything's taken care of, you and you live at home with your parents. And once you're married, then they give you a house, a piece of property, and set you up completely right out of the gate. So
Hmm.
you contribute to the family the whole time until you're married, and then at that point in time you are debt free from day one. And then you keep your whole check, you keep working with your family. A lot of them break off of their own. There's no animosities there. It's completely okay to do that, or you stay working with your family. But it's not for everyone. Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying this is the way it should be, but these people, when it comes to community, if your house burns down, everyone in that community comes over and you have a house built within a week. Like
Hmm.
I have seen barn raisings done in a day. I did not, it's like a bunch of monkeys in denim, like hanging off this stuff. It is amazing to watch these guys work. And, and that's I think what we've really gotten away from. That's another aspect of Mountain Readiness that I'm shooting for is building that community. We have this lone wolf philosophy. It's a great movie. Cool. I watched the movie. That Rambo stuff is awesome, but it's just a movie. And
Hmm.
you can't do it all on your own. That they are the perfect example of what we should all be striving to be as a community.
That sounds the way you describe it, it really does sound like the purest form of self-reliance and just in modern times.
Yes. And they have their own, everything. They have their own doctors, they have their own lawyers, they have their own schools. So they cover all the bases. We as well, they call us us Englishmen. We like all this conveniency too much. In the process, they live great. All of them have livestock. I know John, a good friend of mine that I've worked with for years. Um, some of his horses are worth $1 million. I mean, these that show horses and studding, that ridiculous amount of money. You can never tell it by looking at them. But it's because they come together as a family and a community. They pool all their money together, and they basically just made their own perfect little society.
So now I'm kind of curious if someone were interested in maybe reaching out to an Amish community. Maybe they live nearby, or maybe they're willing to travel a little bit and learn from them.
Hmm.
Do you think, like, how receptive do you think it would be, or does it vary depending on which community you'd reach out to?
I can tell you the Pennsylvania Dutch colonies are the very strict sticklers of the Amish community.
Okay.
But they're in Fort Wayne. I mean, I know quite a few that I could probably talk into to go to, to teach. It's not a bad idea. I need to see if I can get one of them to come to Mountain Readiness. So see if I can
I
get
think that'd
them
be
there
cool.
teaching. Oh, it would. The guys, I mean, and they cover everything, leather working and gardening and building, and they midwife. They everything. Everyone is home birthed unless there is a complication of some sort. It's like I guess growing up, seeing the really hard side of surviving, which is what that was growing up till I was 15, and then working with the Amish, seeing what survival and preparedness should look like. They still have their modern conveniences too. Don't get me wrong. They have, they use lanterns, and the hell, the lighting in some of their houses are better than my lamp right here. Um, and they still use power tools, things like that on job sites. So, but they have set themselves up. If someone flips the switch right now, the Amish community would be perfectly fine, with the exception of security.
Mm.
That's the number one thing. And once again, back to Mountain Readiness. I wanted to see all areas of that. I was just talking, I tell people homesteading. Like, if you don't homestead, you should. Like, you should be growing a garden. I don't care if you just have a patio on your apartment. You should be growing something that you can use for food. Um, but at the same time, you can have the best homestead in the world, but if you can't protect it, you're inevitably growing food for someone else if something goes sideways.
For sure. When you talk about homesteading, and it sounds like that you kind of revisited it later on, like now you're homesteading, right? Um Looking back on that, what do you think are some of the most important lessons that you've had to learn or relearn, for somebody listening who, 'cause just the term homestead can be like an overwhelming thing to think about, like being completely self-sufficient in some capacity. Um, like what were some of the things that you've had to learn that really struck home as the most important?
I think well, let's take that word. I've gotten to know what's great about Mountain Readiness is I get to, when I'm not cleaning toilets and emptying the trash, which is kind of what I do at Mountain Readiness. I do have the opportunities to meet awesome people, and Alan Kay would be one of my favorite that I've gotten to know very well. And of course, Alan Kay won the first season of Alone, and everybody knows him as the guy that won the first season of Alone. But Alan is way deeper than that. The guy is an amazing homesteader. He has he has worked military wise, doing a lot of training over in other countries for Robin Sage and Green Berets and all the things. I mean, the guy is just. If I was stuck in the woods with one person and I could pick, hey, who's your teammate to keep you alive? It'd be Alan, hands down. The guy is amazing. But we had this conversation over pickup truck hood there in Blairsville, Georgia, not more than a few months ago, about the word self-reliance. And people have this misconception that you can actually be completely self-sufficient. And in this day and age, it's impossible to do. And growing up, when I said we were survivors barely surviving and good at starving, I remember days that, we didn't catch anything. So it was 3 days and we didn't eat. And so going 3 or 4 days, Alan had a great saying. He said, 3 days to animal. After 3 days of not eating, you will be surprised how much you think of just about food. That's the only thing that matters, you know. And I'd say the thing that I've learned and revisited that I keep falling back on is that self-sufficiency doesn't exist in this world, and you should try to set your homestead up like our forefathers did 200 years ago. All right. And let me rephrase that. We have chickens and everybody gets chickens and they're like, "Oh, I'm good because I got chickens and eggs." Well, what do those chickens eat? Like, where do you get the food for those chickens? So if something goes stupid, what are you going to feed these chickens? Because you can't just free range them. And especially if it starts getting cold and the wintertime hits, now what are they eating? Where does that feed come from? So are you really self-sufficient? Are you really off the grid? Um, it's prepping your preps. That is the one thing that I can't stress enough to people if you're getting into the preparedness realm. Like, prep your preps. It isn't about what you got. It's about being able to maintain what you have.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's not even thinking about all the other creatures on this earth that enjoy eating chicken as well. Because
Yes.
it doesn't take more than one fox or coyote to decimate your chicken flock.
And just noise alone. I mean, if you're talking from a security standpoint, your animals make noise. They're not just eating, they're making all kinds of noise and racket and cackling and, ban and all the things. Like, so that's a factor in the security of your homestead. There's just so many layers and variables. How about your house, your dwelling? Um, Mold is a thing. Ask everybody with Hurricane Helene. Like,
Mm.
you get water in, mold will kill you in a second, right? Black mold, horrible for you. How do you with the AC? And we've seen these power grid outages overseas, France, all these different areas. In fact, Pennsylvania was just out of power for 10 or 12 days, I believe, just a few weeks ago. I have a friend, Brian Loftus with Survival Gear BSO. He was supposed to be at our event. Well, his father and him, they lost power from that last storm. His father was out for 10 days, no electricity. So he was helping, keep everything rolling there. Um,
Hmm.
Think about if the power, the grid goes down right now. When's the last time you shut the main breaker off at the box and tested those preps? Like,
Hmm.
it's a thing. It's a thing. We lost power here a while back. I hooked the generator up to turn my well pump on, and it didn't come on. Guess what? Because my generator didn't have enough juice to kick that 220 pump on. Luckily, I have a spring coming out of the side of the mountain here, and a huge pond that it feeds, and an artesian well that was capped that pumps water. That's why I bought this property, because water is life. The end. That's number one priority. But um, once again, I didn't test my preps, and there I was thinking I was going to fill up the water tank in the house and maybe take a shower. Nope, not happening. It was sponge bathe time that night.
That's a tough thing for a lot of people though, because most of civilization right now lives in a densely populated urban zone. When Mountain Readiness kicks off, do you guys have courses or people that teach stuff that applies to like the your average urban dweller, who might be in
Oh,
a
for sure.
skyrise apartment or just living in a townhouse or a condo somewhere? Like, would
We we get into all kinds of crazy stuff, man. we don't put a limit on what we do at Mountain Readiness. And I don't like, I'm not a person, I can't stand censorship. Um, I like, I don't agree with everything, like even at Mountain Readiness, but I like the option for people to learn about it and make the decision for themselves. You know, if it's
Mm-hmm.
not directly hurting someone or attacking someone, I think that we should all, you know, that's what it's about, man. Everybody coming together and talking about what they believe. And you
Mm-hmm.
don't have to agree, but there's nothing wrong with having those options to listen to both sides of stories. But we oh yeah, we get into, you know, solar, we get into herbal remedies, tinctures. I had Pat Miletich there, of course, UFC champion, Hall of Famer, teaching hand-to-hand combat. Um, of course, Alan Kay did a thing on grid down survival and living. Um, we did night vision. We had a night vision, IR night vision Friday evening where you could just drive under IR headlights. We had 2 trucks set up with IR headlights, blackout, throw a $10,000 set of binos on and cruise around. I mean, I like all the above, man. I love the tactical side of things. I love the homesteading side of things. I like primitive skills. We even did a chainsaw class. A ton of people got hurt during Hurricane Helene because, you know, people helping people, man. Everybody run down there and all these people come and it was people that has gotten North Carolina in those areas, Spruce Pine and Burnsville, back to where they're at now.
Mm-hmm.
But there was a lot of people got hurt with chainsaws because a lot of people went down there and had never really used a chainsaw in their life. But because human nature is, I want to help people, they went down there and ended up getting themselves hurt. You know,
Mm-hmm.
luckily, I don't think anybody died from chainsaw injuries, but there was quite a few of them. And it comes back to, you know, the thing like test your gear, test your preps. If your pack's 90 pounds, go take it for a 5-mile ruck. If you have a
Mm-hmm.
chainsaw, go cut some wood up with it before you go down and do hurricane relief. So we did a chainsaw class for safety. And, you know, it's stuff like that, man. We want to teach people and bring people things that is not the norm because I'm not, I'm good with having people talk up on a stage, but I can only sit on my duff, fan in my face for so many hours before I'm ready to get up and get my hands dirty.
For sure. What do you think the biggest gaps in knowledge are? Like, what do you think are the top 5?
Mm. Um, False sense of security. That would be, I think, way up there in those top 5. You know, people
Okay.
think that in America, bad things can't happen. And I'm not saying it doesn't have to be terrorism. It has to be just natural disaster wise. No one here in North Carolina said, oh, I'm going to lose my entire home and all my preps and everything in a matter of minutes due to a hurricane and a flood, right?
Mm-hmm.
That was never on anybody's horizon. Um, so a false sense of security is, you know, your preps. Don't just put all your preps in one spot. We were talking with a bunch of people about this here recently, man. It's like, if you got a bunch of food, then move some over to your buddy's house, right? Because you never know. This house could catch on fire today. You just never know. And then everything that I have is gone. If this is a grid down scenario, if this is Hurricane Helene 2, I'm naked and afraid out in the, you know, I'm done. Like I'm shot in the foot. I have to rely on everyone else now. There is no self-sufficiency at that point. So I'd say that would be one of the first biggest things is, um, you know, you got to prep your preps. It's layers. So build those layers. Next is, I don't know, community. People,
That's a big
don't
one.
get me wrong, man. This
That
40
goes back to that
acres,
whole lone wolf thing.
I can
You know,
close myself off.
everybody thinks they're just gonna grab their 22 long rifle and head out to the wood line and they'll just be set for life.
Hey, there is a couple people that I know could pull that off, and that's it. And look, Chuck Norris, he can do it, right? He's Chuck
Oh, of
Norris.
course.
Lone Wolf
Yeah.
McQuade, great movie. But the reality is we can't do it all. Like it's this roof on this house, being in construction, we moved here. I got a great deal on the house because it was falling apart. And so, it looks nice right here, but right over here is a bunch of purple drywall and wires hanging out of the wall. And, my wife hates it. She's going to, if I disappear, my wife did it. Let's put it that way.
We heard it here, folks. Heard it here first, folks.
That's it. That's it. Send the cavalry. She took me out. But we community is one of those things that is overlooked, and because of television and YouTube and all the social media stuff, 90% of that stuff is crap, man. It is. Like, you watch this stuff on YouTube, a lot of that stuff just gets you killed. And it is mildly entertaining, I'm not going to lie, but most of it will get you killed. And let's take that in example. Let's say today, all of a sudden, this podcast just goes blank and a major power grid just blew up for whatever reason, just because of infrastructure. It had nothing to do with anything. It just finally just fell apart. Would you rather get to know your neighbor then or before it mattered? Like, that's because what happens when bad things happen to the world? People get desperate, right? People get desperate. You don't have to worry about anything but your next door neighbor, because desperate people do very bad, desperate things. It just is what it is. It's human nature to survive. It's ingrained in our protein strands of our DNA to stay alive. And so I think building that community before things go wrong is up there at the top of the list as well. Like, my neighbors are great. I know them well. They're into the same stuff. They hunt, fish, shoot, have goats and chickens and raise gardens. And so we can work together. That's what you need to iron out before things go sideways. Because once it goes sideways, no matter what the situation is, your neighbor is not your friend anymore unless you establish that relationship prior to.
I think that's an easy thing for guys like us to say, because you and I think both grew up without the internet, and we were socializing face to face was normal, right? But now there's entire generations who have grown up behind a screen, and being more social is a really challenging thing, because that's something that you learn. Like, those are skills that you learn. It's like how many times you have to ask girls out on a date and get shot down before you like fine tune your technique, right? And get your game on. But if you've never done any type of socializing and learned nuances, to the extent that some of the older generations have, I think that's a problem.
It is. In my previous life, 2 years ago, I had I chased the big corporate dollar, we moved here to start a homestead and to, do all this self-reliance thing per se, if that's actually a thing. It's not. But when I got here, I've been a mechanic. I was also a mechanic. So I run my own construction business in Fort Wayne, as well as I went to work the housing dump in 2008, took the construction business out. I had my oldest daughter was very young at the time, had to pay the bills. I started part-time for the city of Fort Wayne as a mechanic, public transportation department. I worked there for 15 years, and we moved here. I gave that life up. We moved here, and I took a job for a company to start up a road service. They were based out of Rome, Georgia. And so, I came here as basically a road tech, a tire jockey, I guess is what you could call it, working on trailers, side of the interstates, done all that stuff. That's what I've done all my life. Is, my father told me, he's like, you can make your money from the neck up or the shoulders down. And I picked the shoulders down. So always back-breaking work. But, that job right there was that big money job, chasing the corporate dollar. And I did very well for myself, but it was one of those turning points in my life 2 years ago that I had to pick okay, do I want to stay healthy mentally and physically, or do I just want to keep making money? Right. And so,
Mm-hmm.
we, it is amazing what we are willing to do for a piece of paper with dead people on it. You know what I'm saying?
Ain't
And,
that the truth?
there's nothing wrong with making money. I'm not dissing it, but there is something for sacrificing everything for that dollar. And so it was the balance, trying to get that balance. So, my previous life was doing that. And then now 2 years later is, trying to get back to the roots and to build on what we originally moved here for, which was to become more self-sufficient and prepared for whatever the world may sling at us. So, it's been a struggle, though. I think that was another thing with Mountain Readiness. We were really struggling for knowledge, because once again, just like you said, and I went off track there, that's what happens with old age too, Patrick. You just kind of just start wandering after a while. Mine starts wandering. And I think
I'll
where
bring
I
it
was
back. You
going with,
still owe me 3 knowledge gaps.
I got
I'm
3
keeping
more.
track.
That's what I'm doing. I'm trying to push this off as far as I possibly can to come up with the other 3. That's what it is. But we were talking about kids and the internet and all that stuff. I was hiring guys. They would apply for a job with us, and I would go through 20, 30 people, the hiring process, interviews, a week. I got suckered into being a regional operations director for this company. So I was 26 states cruising around, 100 service trucks. Just, I dealt with all the big names, Penske, JB Hunt, all these huge trucking companies, South Carolina Port Authority. But it was scary that I would call over and over again to these young men and women who had placed an application for a job, and they wouldn't answer. And if I text them, then they would answer within seconds. And I
Mm.
was like, what has the world come to? How has the world become that you're so scared to talk on the phone to another human being? And that's what it came down to. As soon as I text, boom, I get a reply. Um, that's the world we live in, man. That's the stuff we need to get away from.
Yeah, yeah. It's I wonder how many of those people are becoming employers or managers themselves. And now are managers preferring text and those types of like nonverbal communications,
It's across the
versus just a
board.
direct phone call or
It's across the board. Like, texting has become the acceptable. Like, for me, I remember, I'm sure you do too, texting where you had to hit all the letters. I had to hit Y, 6 times to get it to become another. I don't even
yeah.
remember how I text like that now. It's gone from
Used
my
to be
memory.
really
But
fast at that.
yeah, even you didn't even have to look. You could be holding it down to your side, having a conversation with somebody else, texting. But at that time, a text to me was kind of a slap in the face. To me, it was like it was an impersonable way of just getting a message out, and it was usually, "Hey, man, I'll call you back." Like,
Hmm.
it wasn't like business. But now it's a completely acceptable way to do business, and I fall short in it too because it's what everyone is doing.
And there's so many different ways. There's so many flavors of texting now. You can shoot off an email, send an SMS, go on to Discord, go on to Slack. Like there's just a million different ways, and somehow like everybody wants you to keep track of everything all at once, and it can be overwhelming and frustrating. At
Especially
least for
in the
us old
business,
guys.
especially in this business as well. We got on here and I couldn't figure out how to turn the volume on, to my headphones. But to do Mountain Readiness, to do off grid, recoil off grid, you have to utilize social media because the world has become that place. And that's what everyone gets their information from now. So
And that could be the silver lining. I mean, before we wouldn't be able to get onto the internet and watch a podcast about 2 people discussing being more self-reliant. So, I mean,
it's a two-edged
it's
sword.
I was just about to say that. Yep, it certainly is.
Great minds think alike. Great minds think
I'd
alike,
like to think
Patrick.
so.
I mean, it works for me. It works for me. But I guess I don't know if I can hit 5, Patrick. I
No?
would say
Okay.
I
Let's
would
do
say
top
3.
3.
Let's go top 3 because number 3 for me, I would say I'm going to put this at the very top. I'm going to put this at the very top. It's above the importance of how many preps you have. I don't care how much ammo you got, how much stored food you got. I don't care any of those things. Those all play a part into it. But I try to preach over and over again is you as a person. How many times have you seen on the internet or heard someone, they're like, man, if stuff goes sideways, I'm coming to your house. Right?
Mm,
We've all heard it. We've all
yep.
if you're that guy, shame on you. You know, as a joke, it's fine. All right. But let's be honest here, is if stuff goes stupid, it's high alert and everybody's safeguarding everything what they got. The end.
That's
Um,
true.
so people all the time, they say, well, how do I build community? Well, number one, go to events like ours, or don't go to another event. Just go meet people, and you'd be surprised how many people you will meet in your area, even if you're out of state. You know, this is it's a huge community, but it's very small at the same time. It's funny. I see people at Mountain Readiness all the time that haven't seen each other for years that have run into each other at our event, live states apart. They're like, holy, I can't believe you're here, you know, because it's a tight knit community. But I think number 3, above all else, is are you a viable asset to your community? So it's not
Mm.
just enough that you have a community of friends that you get together on the weekends and do a little shooting and share preparedness tips.
It's
Is
a good start, though.
It's a good start. It's a good start. You should. But if things go stupid, you know, I get to hang out with like some of the best in the business, you know, Carl Erickson and Alan Kay and Chris Weatherman, all these survivalists, Jax Janega, you know. But at the end of the day, for your community, what do you have to offer as an individual, right? And so I tell everyone is sit down and make a list, look at yourself in the mirror, and say what makes me a viable asset to my community. Because if you don't have enough to offer, and I don't want to sound coarse here, but it's a give or take world. It's a you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours world. And it also is dog eat dog, right? So um what is your assets to your community? And if you don't have a lot to give, man, the internet is a great place. You can learn all kinds of stuff. Get in there, get after it, because you are only as important to your group and your community as what you can offer. You know, if I'm a great mechanic, heavy truck mechanic. It's what I did. I can work on anything. Construction, homestead, not too bad on a trigger. You know, but there is places that I need to up my prep as well. And so that would be number one, is be a viable asset to your community. And if your family is all that you have, that's your inner circle anyway, then make sure that you have your family trained up, you know. And that's
I
it.
might
I'd
argue
say that
that's
was
where you
number
should
one.
start.
That's that's the tip of the spear, man. That's the inner core.
Yep.
That should be your number one. If there's a bump in the night, it's me and my wife that's answering that call. So you know, I got to make sure. Well, I don't worry about my wife. My wife's a 3-time combat vet, did 9 years Afghanistan, Iraq, Kuwait with 2 Purple Hearts.
I was gonna
I
say, if you're worried about her disappearing you, then
Yeah,
I feel bad for whoever's making those bumps in the night.
that's it. That's it. Yeah, I'll give that one number one, man. Be an asset to your community, your family, and that comes with training and working hard to learn the things that you need to learn.
You mentioned, speaking of community, you mentioned way in the beginning, um, the I guess I'd call it municipal overreach of where you were living kind of inspired you to move back
Mm.
out and start homesteading again. What was your experience with that?
So my wife Amber, she was born and raised in New Haven, which is right there on the edge of Fort Wayne. And the house that we had was a double lot. It was a real big, it was basically a quarter acre in town. So yeah, that's pretty roomy for in town. And I had decided, it was time to start growing the garden again, and just for the sake of nutrition, because the stuff that's at the store anymore is just garbage. And health wise, the older you get, I used to think I was good at health and nutrition when I was young. I just realized I was young, you know. Yeah, it's amazing. You can eat anything and do anything you want when you're young, and
The
you're
glory
still good.
days.
Starts showing once you hit that 40 mark. Anything over that, you're like, oh, that kind of hurt. Why did that happen? Um, but we wanted to, start having. We even, we're thinking about chickens, but the city decided that our garden was attracting pests. We couldn't have it. We couldn't have an additional shed because it was against the code. You can only have so many sheds. You can't burn wood in town. There's a condemned house across the street, and it's got 4-foot grass growing in it. I'm like, well, what about that? Oh no, that doesn't matter. That's between the bank and I'm like, this is garbage. So
Hmm.
my wife, we had talked about moving, and I was like, I'd really like to get back to the country to where we can kind of have a little bit more freedom to breathe. And so for a year, we drove down to these parts looking at property. We would leave on Friday night after work and drive all night, get down here. It was over 500 miles one way. Get down here. We'd have all of our property listings already set up. And so we would stay up all Saturday looking at property. And then we would Sunday evening, Sunday afternoon, we'd hit the road, drive all the way back to Fort Wayne. We did that for almost a year before we found this place here. Um, but that was the motivator. It was like, every time I turned around, I had two guys try to jack my motorcycle at a light in downtown Fort Wayne. I got off work from the city there at midnight. So, hey, you want to know why you have a flashlight on your pistol? Because bad stuff happens at night. That's when it
Mm.
happens, guys. But I was at a light, and luckily I kicked my stuff in neutral, and two guys tried to snatch my bike, and it didn't work out for them. And so, but it was those things: cars getting broke into, fighting with the city, um, no freedoms, and that's what prompted us to find another place. So a year later of driving down here, we found this place. We made an offer, and 3 months after the offer, I was actually living here. Started work, getting settled in, and then my wife, she moved down 3 months after that, after wrapping up everything in Fort Wayne. So it was a struggle, man. It was a mighty struggle to get from here, there to here. Um, it's crazy. People see where you're at in life, and they're like, man, must be nice, but they don't see all that stuff beforehand.
The
Um,
effort and sacrifice that goes into it.
it's a mighty struggle.
It is. It is for sure. Um, I wanted to ask you too about your experience being homeschooled and how you think it compares to public education. Like what's the biggest difference you see between kids who are homeschooled versus the um the end result of a public education?
Um, I don't I'm not dissing any public schools. And we had went through some public school. We'd go for like a couple weeks, and dad, mom would pull us out. We'd go back to homeschool. It just depends on where we moved. But I know of some public schools that are actually pretty decent. Um, but at the same time, I'm not trying to keep everybody in the past and this primitive world, but you know, our kids are given to us for us to bring up how we would want them to be, right? And I think I think this world has been designed to pull the family unit apart. Children are not free thinkers anymore. They're trained to be worker ants in the public education system. At 8 a.m., the bell rings, you sit down. And then at every time you change the class, the bell rings and you go. And then right at noon, the bell rings and you march into the lunchroom and you sit down. And an hour later, it rings. And we prep our children to be good little worker ants. And we're sold this white picket fence facade of what being a perfect, great American is supposed to be. And it's all crap, really. Like, where is it that living the dream is a 30-year mortgage to pay 4 times the amount for a house, and your whole best years of your life are spent in a cubicle staring at a square screen typing on a keyboard? Like, where did we go wrong with that? That's my question. So homeschooling for me I was a free thinker even as a young child. I did my schoolwork. We even graded our own schoolwork. There's a trust thing that is built right there. We went in and took our equivalency testing with the schools to make sure we were still up to par. We always came in at a higher than standard. I'm not a genius by far. Don't look at me like that. But it's being a free thing. And then I went outside and I enjoyed the wilderness. I enjoyed boredom is a great thing because it makes you think and learn new things. I play the guitar, I play the banjo, I'm good with art. I anything outdoors, splitting firewood and building log cabins and hunting and fishing, and even my brother and sister the same way. My sister is a top recruiter in Indianapolis, Indiana. She's published multiple books now as a writer. My brother runs his own business as an artist. He does airbrushing. He's been in Easy Rider magazine and Thunder Roads, and so for being growing up off grid in the middle of nowhere with no electricity and no running water, somehow we did just fine. And that's where that people get this misconception of, oh, homeschooling, you're sheltering your children and they won't be able to interact with other people. On the contrary, man, I run my mouth nonstop, as you see during this podcast.
I love it. So I've got 2 questions left for you. My second to last, my penultimate question. If anybody is looking to learn more about Mountain Readiness or what you have going on, where do they find you?
So we are on all the social media stuff, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. It's www.mountainreadiness.com. So I have to update the website from our last deal here in May. Yep, it's on me. It's my fault. I haven't done it yet. Once again, technology. But yeah, it's under Mountain Readiness on everything. Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. We do some videos and stuff. I'm horrible when it comes to doing videos and social media. I'm not going to lie, guys. Like, don't expect a lot. If you don't expect a lot, you're going to love us.
He's managing expectations. Good.
That's
good
it.
To go.
That's it.
So we covered a pretty broad range of topics, man. If you could condense all of your experience and wisdom into one golden survival nugget, what would your one survival piece of wisdom be?
Let's just, wisdom, I guess the best way. I had this boss of mine years ago who was, he used to be Amish. He actually left the Amish. He was actually excommunicated because he painted his buggy white. And so they finally kicked him out. You're not allowed to have a white buggy,
Sounds like a classy buggy.
It was awesome. So at 17 years old, he was excommunicated, could never go back, awesome guy though. But, he told me one time, he was like, you get older. They say wisdom is getting older. The older you get wise. And he said, really, wisdom is when you realize that you don't know even half of what you thought you know. And that's I guess the golden nugget. If you think you got it all figured out, you need to step back. You don't. And same thing with preparedness. Like, you're never prepared enough. You're never ready enough. There's never enough layers. And if you think you know it all, you don't. So wisdom is understanding that you are really not that wise.
Fair enough. Fair enough. T, thank you for joining me. Love to have you back sometime, and I appreciate you sharing your story with us. It was an interesting ride.
I'm going to publish that book fiction because nobody believe half that crap. So, but Patrick, it was great, man. Thanks, and maybe one of these days you'll jump on our live on Monday night too. I'd love to get you and Nick on there to run our yaps, man. I'm sure you guys got plenty of awesome stories from when I talked to Nick.
Heck yeah, I'd love to do that. Let's make it happen.
Let's make it happen. Thanks a lot.